Okay, so good morning, everyone. We've got a big audience for this webinar today, looking at what's possible with Python in ArcGIS. Before we get into that, there's a couple of housekeeping things to go through. We are recording the webinar and there will be a link sent round in the follow-up email, so look out for that. And that email will also include links to some useful resources. So that you can get a little bit more out of the topic. Hopefully we're going to inspire you to go off and either try Python, try some new things in Python, or kind of stretch yourselves a little bit with it. As I mentioned, for those of you that have joined at the beginning, we'll be running the Q&A at the end, and we'll be using Slido for the questions. So you can post your questions at any time using Slido. The information's on the screen and it will appear a couple of times through the slide deck as well. And we'll also post it up at the end. It's really helpful to us if you upvote questions. We will kind of tackle them in popularity order. And with a big audience today, I think it's unlikely that we'll be able to get through all of the questions. But we will get through as many as we can. So again, make sure that you upvote ones that you're keen to hear the answers on. And let me just pop my camera on and introduce myself. So I'm Alistair Hind. I'm a senior consultant in our product communications team. And I'm joined today by colleagues from professional services and learning services. So if you want to just introduce yourselves.
Hi there, I'm Will Carney. I'm a software engineer who uses Python day to day, helping organizations solve their GIS problems.
And hi there, my name's Ed. I work for Learning Services team and I teach our Python courses for our customers.
That's great, thank you. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to Python and some of the different ways that you can use it within ArcGIS and how to get started with it, and then hand over to Will, and then Ed's going to help us out with the Q&A and bring all that knowledge to bear on the questions that you have for us. So in terms of using Python within ArcGIS, you can use it in ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Enterprise, and in ArcGIS Pro. And you can do that either using Python scripts, which you can run against any of those environments. So within ArcGIS Pro, or running in an enterprise deployment, or you can set up a standalone Python script to run and work with ArcGIS Online as well. There's also the option in all three of those environments to use the ArcGIS Notebooks. So this is an implementation of the Jupyter Notebook, and that gives you a different style of environment to work with your Python. And then in terms of the different packages that are available, so there are two. There's ArcPy, which is a Python site package. This is what comes with ArcGIS Pro, and we'll be having a look at that in a minute, but is also available in those other environments as well. And it has lots of tools for performing analysis and for managing and converting data, as well as being able to carry out map automation tasks as well. And then we also have the ArcGIS API for Python. So this Python library, again, you can use it for things like analysis and spatial data management. It also has visualization tools as part of it, but also lends itself to GIS system administration tasks and works really well with that WebGIS environment. And we're going to jump over now into ArcGIS Pro and start to have a look at, I guess, sort of getting started with Python and some of the ways that you can use it within Pro. So I needed an example to work on. This was an idea that I'd had based on this concept in flood management and conservation of starting to look at maybe rewiggling some of the rivers in Britain that have been straightened out over the years, so that floodwater is held higher in catchments. One of the local projects that I sometimes help out with I was chatting to somebody there, and they were talking about it and about how people are starting to change the view of how and where we need to be managing floodwater. So I got interested in seeing whether or not there was a simple way to score the wiggliness of a section of river. And I don't use Python much. I've dipped into it a bit before. So for me, I would tend to go towards the geoprocessing tools and start to kind of collect those together and chain them together into a workflow using Model Builder. But actually, that means that I'm already using Python. So the geoprocessing environment in ArcGIS Pro is built to make use of and use Python. And so all of those tools that are available in the geoprocessing environment can all be accessed and run as Python, so using the ArcPy module. So just to show you this, if we drag one of the tools from the geoprocessing window across into the Python console at the bottom there, you'll see that it's automatically identified the ArcPy package and the class within that and the method that I want to use, which is the clip. And you'll also see that it starts to automatically prompt me with the different options in my map. And you'll see above it as well, it gives a little bit of a kind of brief description of what the particular function does and also what the arguments are. And then the blue eye will give you a link out to the help documentation. And if you've used the geoprocessing tools and you've kind of scrolled down through the help documentation, you'll always see some Python sample at the bottom, and that's where that connection comes from. Like I say, because I'm not that comfortable with Python, I'm fairly new to it. For me, it's easier to kind of get my ideas together and work through a workflow in Model Builder. And the nice thing about this is it then means that when you start to play about with it in Python, you know what to expect. So it's a good way of kind of having a go and being able to check that what you're getting out of it is what you what you're expecting. So you could either work through and run them the different elements through the console, or the other option is to use a script. So rather than starting from scratch in the script, I can actually export my model to a Python file. And what you then get is a Python script that runs that series of steps. And you'll see that if you export from Model Builder, you get this very regular structure where each of those blocks in the model has this process comment at the top of it. And so you can easily see what those different functions look like as Python calls and what the arguments are for them. So again, another way to kind of get familiar with it. In terms of the structure of the script, it's actually set up to use a function. So it generates a function based on the model name. And then down the bottom here is the bit where it's actually then running that function and calling the methods within it. With a Python script, if you want to be able to use them within ArcGIS Pro, the other thing that you can do, so here are my toolboxes, this is the model that we're looking at, you can actually bring a script in and run it as a tool. And those are something that you can then share with colleagues as well. So, again, you may have people in the organization already who've been creating scripts, and you might have scripts that you run. When you bring in a script, you can set it up, you import the script, you can set it up with parameters like you can for a model. And then to actually run that, it's just the same as running any other model. If you double click on it, it's now giving me a parameter that I can fill in. We're going to run a different place. We can kick that off running, and it will then pop any messages that I've included into the console view. And if we just go in and edit the script, I've actually changed this slightly from my original model. It's just going to take a moment to open. Here we go. And in this particular version, rather than having a layer that has a single catchment in it, I've got a select going on. So I'm selecting a single catchment from a set of features using a where clause. And in terms of the steps in my model, it's then running a clip against the OS Open Rivers data, and then it calculates the length of those, runs a buffer against them, and then does a calculation into a new field. So we've got the buffer and then adding a new field to store the calculation. And then my very simplistic meander index, so apologies to any hydrologists, it's just based on the idea that when you buffer it, if it's a wiggly river, then the ratio between the buffer and the length of the segment is going to be different to if it's a straight line. And so if it was a completely straightened section of river, and then it's just outputting that so that I can then add it to the map. So that just gives you a little bit of a sense of how you can use Python within ArcGIS Pro, and how you can maybe get started with it if you're not familiar with it, and use that kind of crossover between the geoprocessing tools and the way they work, and starting to have a go at writing scripts. And also the other thing that I kind of find is that when you're writing the script, there's the help documentation, and that will explain the arguments and things. But again, coming back to this console window, if you're working in Pro, can be quite a quick way of stepping through the arguments. So if you're kind of looking to use a tool that you've not used before in your script, it can be quite a quick way of just, find the tool in the geoprocessing toolboxes, drag it down the bottom, and it will start to show you the arguments, or you can just start typing the name if you know it. So that's using ArcPy in ArcGIS Pro. I'm now going to jump over to ArcGIS Online, and we're going to have a look at notebooks. So in the notebook environment in ArcGIS Online, you can access either of the two options in terms of ArcGIS, the ArcGIS API for Python. You can also run ArcPy in ArcGIS Online using a notebook. And so I've ported my kind of script across and set it up as a notebook. And in order to use ArcPy, you need to use the advanced notebooks. There are 3 different types of notebooks. When you go to create one, you can choose the appropriate one. Notebooks does require your administrator to have given you access to that option within ArcGIS Online. So if you don't see notebook as an option at the top here, that's because it's not something that your administrator has set up for you. The standard notebook allows you to run the ArcGIS API for Python. If you want to use ArcPy, you need to create an advanced notebook, and this then does consume credits on a 3 credit per hour basis. So while you're working with the notebook, it will be consuming some credits in the background. So that's just something to be aware of. And you'll see when it opens up that a notebook looks quite different to a script. It gives you this nice ability to structure your script in a different way. So as well as being able to add the comments into a script, which is what we've got here, you can also create these headers, and those then act as a way of breaking up the script, and you can actually kind of collapse them to hide things like this section at the beginning that's just running the import and is importing both the ArcGIS API for Python module, but also I'm importing ArcPy in this case because I want to be able to use that. So you can have these collapsed, and that means that when you're working with the script, you're not having to kind of scroll past the simple setup space. The other thing that you get with the notebook is a direct interface into some of your portal content. So whether you're using ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. And again, this means that things like adding the layers, which I'm doing down here, is actually really simple. So you can either start to kind of script it, Or because these are services and you need the unique ID to be able to access them, the easiest way is just to open up this panel on the left, and it gives you that same content view that you get when you're working in other parts of ArcGIS Online. And it's really easy then just to add a layer and bring that across. So the catchments one, if we just search for that, all you have to do is click add, and it just inserts a new cell into your notebook with that. I've then renamed it. It defaults to item, so I've renamed mine so that I've kind of got a clear distinction. And again, that's one of those things that most of you will be familiar with, that if you use meaningful names, it's easier further on. The other thing that I hadn't appreciated, I'd used notebooks a little bit with layers before, but I hadn't used ArcPy in a notebook in ArcGIS Online before. One of the other things that you can do is actually create a local file geodatabase, which is what's going on in this section here, and that sits in this file space which you can access here. So again, this script part of it is setting up that file geodatabase so I can then run things in the same way. And then just stepping down, it's very similar to what you saw in the script. But the other thing with the notebook is that you can step through these and you can run them a line at a time. So rather than running the whole script and wait until the end and then getting a message to say that you actually made an error, you can step through, and that's the new content I added. It's we've missed the imports step at the beginning. So, oops, because I didn't run my full setup. It's actually come in above it. So we'd need that to sit there. Hit run. And as you step through these, it allows you to troubleshoot them on a kind of line, kind of block by block basis. So it's quite a nice environment for developing a script as well, because you have that ability to step through, get each bit working, and then move on to the next one. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of a sense of some of the different options, and also giving you a kind of brief introduction to using ArcPy in ArcGIS Pro, but also using a notebook within ArcGIS Online, and remembering that you have that option to use both the ArcGIS API for Python, but also if you create an advanced notebook, you can use ArcPy in Online as well. I'm now going to hand over to Will, who's going to bring this together and kind of take it on a little bit further by exploring a very seasonal workflow with you. So over to you, Will.
Thanks, Alistair. Yeah, so as I mentioned on my intro, I use Python every day, and I see the value it adds to organizations in automating both the desktop and WebGIS workflows. I can wrap up repeated tasks into a nice streamlined automated script. So let's begin to share my screen. Sorry, 2 seconds. Great. Now that's coming through. Yeah, so the context for this, I thought I'd give it a bit of a seasonal twist. We're a week away from Halloween, so the first thing I did was put my Pro into dark mode, and then create a fictional organization that has been tasked with mapping paranormal incidents around the country. So this script is designed to ingest data. It's going to then do some basic analysis on that before sharing it to my portal's users and creating some content for them to use the data. So opening Pro, I can open a notebook and begin to construct my workflow that previously I might have had to do manually. My first cell is just importing my relevant libraries and making a connection to my GIS. Once I have my GIS portal connection established, I can access different elements of my portal, like my users, my content, and my apps and maps. So let's click Run. This will then make the connection, and now I can use my GIS variable in the rest of my script. So my workflow, as I said, is ingesting data. So I first need to bring my data in. So using the Python API, I can make a connection to my feature service that has been generated by another app, such as Field Maps or Survey 123. I can then copy it locally into a feature class in my browser, in my ArcGIS Pro's cache, so that I can perform some analysis on it using ArcPy. I'm also at this stage attaching a time query on this. So this just allows me to filter relevant incidents. So I'm only really interested in what happened last night. So passing my timestamp here, I can filter my data out immediately, so that I'm only processing a small subset of last night's data. So clicking run. I've taken my new incidents, I've applied my clause, and now I'm ready to work with my new subset. So I want to, as part of this, do a bit of pre-processing before I eventually push it into my portal. And this includes assigning these incidents a region. A region is just based upon a reference data set, polygons, and I'm performing a spatial join using ArcPy to snap a region onto my regions field within my data. I'm also interested in incidents that occurred in a cluster. And this means that 3 incidents have to have occurred in the same region for me to treat it as an outbreak and then do something about it. So I can do both of these in the same cell. First, I'm performing a spatial join before applying a basic count. So this will just count the number of other incidents in the same region, which is assigned to my number of regional incidents field, which I then query to filter out anything that has a value of more than 3. Finally, once I'm happy with that, I have my feature class locally, which includes my regional reference data, my filtered data, and I now want to share that. So to do that, I can make a connection to my historic sightings data before appending my feature to that. And here you can see how I'm pushing and pulling from both the Python API and ArcPy. I'm doing my analysis of ArcPy before sharing the data via the Python API. So let's run that. As that runs, I can see that incidents have been detected in the following regions. And if I tab over to my web map, zoom in and out, you can see them appearing. So this shows how I've done some processing, I've assigned them a region, and now I've shared it with my portal. So now it's appearing from both my desktop GIS into my web GIS. So what happened last night? Well, we had, it seems like, a lake monster up in Loch Lomond. Going down here, Dartmoor is always a hotspot. What's going on here? Oh, the beast of Dartmoor's out again. So yeah, we can see there, we've taken the data, we've done some local processing and then shared it with our WebGIS. But now we need to do something about it. We can't have beasts running around Dartmoor. We can't have Yetis and Cairngorms. So we need to task some users to do something about this and contain these incidents. To do this, I can begin to automate some of my administrative portal tasks. Previously, I would have to do this manually, gone into my organizational settings and configured new users. But that's not a great use of my time. I could probably streamline this using some of the Python API capabilities. So I have a codex or an Excel of agents that could potentially deal with this, but I need to provide a bit of a filter on this. I only want agents that are active in the regions where incidents are ongoing, and I also only want agents with a status as active, or we can probably get away with 1 day from retirement. So what I need to do is reaching out to an external library like pandas. I can bring this in as a table object within my code. So running this, I first make a connection to my Excel. I grab all the relevant information from the different columns before querying that. And then using my GIS object, I access my users and then apply the create method on that, passing in the information that's grabbed from my Excel. I then assign them a group that's based upon the region, if they're not already in the group already. And as you can see, we have a few new agents added to our portal. A few of you will get these old references. But if I tab over to my groups, I can see them here. And then if I just refresh my list of users in my organization, they'll begin to appear there. So That's great. I've got a map of the incidents. I've got users to deal with them, but I want to make some targeted content. The Python API allows me to do this. I can hook into the different web items that I've created in my portal, and this includes my web mapping applications. So let's scroll down. This cell, first, it creates a map of the different incidents for each region. So I have an array of different regions where incidents have been detected, and I can now create a map for each. So using the web map object, I can first clone my template of my map. I can then access the layers within my map to apply a filter to only show those relevant areas where incidents are ongoing for that map. And then I can give it a new title so that it's targeted to that specific region before sharing it to my group. I can take that one step forward. I have a dashboard already pre-configured. I can update the dashboard, clone it, again, apply the same filters. So I'm only showing data points within my relevant region. And then I can save it and share it with my group so that they can now access and see that dashboard as part of their group content. So let's run that. As you can see, it's looping through each of the groups and creating these items individually. And that's the end of my Python, but if I just jump over to my groups and let's go to the Scottish Highlands. Now I just quickly look at the members of my group. I can see Jim's been added from Stranger Things fame, and I can see 2 items have been created and shared with this group. So let's jump into the dashboard. And as you can see, as the data loads, it's been filtered to just be relevant to the Highlands. As I tab around, you can see it's pulling in both the historic and the data that I've published as part of my script. So just to wrap up, those are a few things you can think about automating. I hope you found some real world examples there, or maybe a bit out of this world, but yeah, it just demonstrates the power of just automating using the Python API and ArcPy to really wrap up your repeated workflows into nice scripted notebooks that you can now use to kind of perform these tasks that you may previously had to have done manually. And yeah, that's all I've got time for today. So yeah, drop any questions you have on what I've just shown in the Slido, and I'll get back to you.
Thank you, Will. I'm just letting the slide share wide. Hopefully you can see the slides okay. So just to kind of recap and wrap up, thanks to Will for kind of making it all come to life in such a great scenario as well. So in terms of those 2 options, so we've got ArcPy and ArcGIS API for Python. The ArcPy library requires an installation, but it does come with desktop, so with both ArcMap and also ArcGIS Pro, whereas the API for Python does require access to ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. You can install it and run it kind of standalone via Conda or pip as well. And then in terms of the kind of relative differences between the 2, we've got ArcPy is kind of sort of big strength is the access to all those spatial analysis tools, but it's also kind of works well for some data management and automating tasks, and it's relatively easy to use. The API for Python, you can use it for analysis, but you don't get the same kind of breadth of options, but it works really well for data management and for automating tasks, both in terms of data and item management, but also you can use it for those administrative tasks like Will showed in his workflow, where he was kind of managing access and kind of setting up users and those kind of things. So for a large organization, there's a big time saving in making use of it for some of those things. And also, again, it's a fairly easy to use and a flexible option there as well. So we're going to head over into the Q&A, and just before we do, just a kind of call out that our next webinar in November is registration is live on the website now. So the focus in the next one is going to be on imagery. So if you're interested in different options and different ways of seeing the world with imagery, sign up for that, which is going to run on the 21st of November. And we're now going to go over into the Q&A. So hopefully Ed is ready and raring to go with answering some of your questions.
Hello. So lots and lots of questions. So we've got the first one from Anonymous. Anonymous has been posting quite a lot of questions here, actually. So one feature of ArcPy that I've noticed is that error messages are quite often vague. Are there any moves to make these more specific? Well, there is actually. Something I've learned very recently, looking at some of the Developer Summit videos that are available on the MediaSpace website, which Esri provide, fantastic resource if you haven't seen it, is that with the new 3.3 release of ArcGIS Pro, Esri have been doing quite a bit of work with error messages. So you are getting more information back from those error messages. That's not to say that you can't help yourself, because the error messages, and I'm thinking of the big red error messages, those traceback error messages, they provide you with everything you need to be able to debug your code. So I always say to course attendees, read the error message, because you've got the line number, you've got the line of code, you've got the actual Python error itself, and you've got a description of what the error actually is. And to be honest, the more code you write, the more you'll understand how to debug your code through error messages. So yeah, if you haven't moved up to ArcGIS Pro 3.3, do so, because that's where you'll find this enhanced error messaging coming through. Okay.
Thank you, Ed. Just jumping ahead a little bit, one of the ones that I picked up was about notebooks and the use of credits in ArcGIS Online. So I did touch on this briefly as I kind of went through, but I appreciate it was fairly quick. So in terms of credit usage, if you're using a standard notebook, it doesn't use any additional credits. But if you are making use of the ArcGIS Online analysis tools, so the ones that you access through the ArcGIS API for Python, those tools have a credit cost to them, and so you will still use credits if you are performing analysis. If you use the advanced notebook, which was the one that I used to be able to run ArcPy, one of the kind of advantages of that is that if you use ArcPy, you can run your analysis steps without there being a credit cost to running them, but there is a credit cost to running that notebook. So it depends how big a task it is as to how long the notebook is active, as to what the actual number of credits that you'll use is. So with an advanced notebook, as soon as you spin it up, you are making use of credits, so you are using credits, which is a good reminder to me to go and shut down my sample so I don't overrun them. And you may have noticed there's a third option which gives you access to another level of kind of tools and capabilities around some of the AI options. And again, with that, there's a different credit limit, and you can see those in the notebooks window just by clicking the create notebook. It does show you what those credit usage rates are for those more advanced notebooks.
Okay, I'm going to take the most upvoted one Are there any ways to have Python scripts run based on triggers, e.g. a layer edit, rather than just based on a schedule? The answer to that is no, I'm afraid. If you want to go down that route, you'll need to not use Python. You'll need to use the ArcGIS Pro SDK to be able to do that. The ArcGIS Pro SDK provides you with much more fine resolution based objects, and one of the things it allows you to do is intercept those sorts of events. But you'll need to write some C#.NET code or VB.NET code to do that. So you can do a lot of things in Python, but that's one of the things you can't do. ArcMap used to have this concept of Python add-ins, and Python add-ins used to expose a certain number of events, but the framework, the Python framework between ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro has changed so much so that Python add-ins are no longer supported. So the recommended route is to go down to use the ArcGIS Pro SDK to do that sort of event-based triggering action that you're after. So I'm just having a look, see what other things
So just
we've got.
while you're having a look,
Yeah.
Ed, I was just going to jump in on the question about sharing the notebook. We weren't planning to. We could maybe have a look at whether we could get that up as a blog, and so we will have a look into that. But I guess the other thing to be aware of is that there's lots of examples out there. In the resources, we'll be including links to some self-led courses. So there's lots of tutorials. There is an instructor-led course as well. The other thing, which again, if you go into the notebooks in ArcGIS Online, there are actually some Esri curated notebooks that are kind of sat there already as examples. So you can open up a notebook and have a look through, and those are really well documented. So they're a kind of great way of getting a sense of what you can do, and they cover a whole range of topics as well. Even without Will's spooky example to work from, there's lots to go out there. And I guess on that, Will, have you got any favourite Halloween sweets?
Good question. Salty American, but I always had a soft spot for candy corn. What about you,
I
Alistair?
certainly don't, because I'm always on a diet. So believe it or not. But yeah. So I've got another one here that I feel we can give an answer to. So anonymous, voted by 15 people. Can you import models created in Python over to Arc, or do models need to be created in ArcPy? Well, what you're doing is you're predominantly creating models inside of ArcGIS Pro. Okay, that's what you're doing. So Model Builder, fantastic visual language. Many people like to use it because if you're like me, you think sort of visually. And we use Model Builder as a way of sort of chaining together those tools, which was amply demonstrated within the demos of the webinar. So you create your model, but then you can export that model out to Python, I think, as Alistair showed you quite nicely. So that's one of the techniques that I use if I want to understand how a geoprocessing tool works inside of Python, because it's easier to run that tool inside a model builder, make sure that tool does what it's supposed to do. Once you're happy with that tool and what the results it gives, you can then export that model out directly, or you can even export the model out as a Python snippet as well. So yeah, the answer to the question is you create your models predominantly in ArcGIS Pro, and then you can export that model out to Python. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you, Ed. And there are a couple of questions at the top, which I've got to admit, Python's not my area of expertise, as I kind of said at the beginning. But some of them, I think, with questions about things like the kind of one that sat there about recommended methods for storing passwords and things. We'll have a look, see if there's any kind of general guidelines that we can link you to. I guess with some of those as well, it depends a little bit on the specifics of what it is that you're trying to do in the environment that you're working with. So it's always good to kind of reach out to us directly through your Esri contacts, so that we can give you guidance that's specific to your setup. Because obviously with something like storing passwords and security, it's really important that we get those right. So each case may be a little bit different, so depending what it is that you're trying to achieve. So if you are one of the people that's wanting to know about that, please reach out to us through your Esri contacts. And I guess a kind of similar thing around the excuse me, the kind of backup side of things. Again, it's not something that I know about. I know that we do use, there are some different kind of ways of tackling this, and again, it's going to depend a little bit on what it is that you're trying to do. But I think, Ed, have you got some thoughts on that one?
Oh, I don't, to be honest. I can only sort of reiterate what you've just said there. I think what you've given there is pretty good advice, actually. So
I've just linked a nice document that I found and I've used previously that just outlines the different authentication schemes you can use. So yeah, use this a couple of times just to anonymize usernames and passwords when running things like scheduled notebooks.
That's great. And what we'll do then is pop that link into the follow-up. And this was something that kind of came in as a question somewhere. I saw it kind of pass by, and it's not quite drifted to the top. But just just a reminder that off the back of the webinar, you'll get an email which will include the link to the recording, but will also include some resources there. So it'll include links out to some of those training modules that I talked about and some of those examples. So those will help you get started. Ed, there's a question there about training for people with no or little coding experience, and I feel like that's one that sits well on your doorstep.
yeah, absolutely. So we provide a lot of resources. So if you have a look at the Esri.com website, you can have a look at the training part of that website, and there are lots and lots of free training resources there, especially to do with Python. Okay, so please have a look on that website, the Esri.com website. Look at the training website. There's some really good stuff on there. Also have a look at the learn.arcgis.com website as well. So you've got lots of tutorials on there. Those tutorials, the Esri.com website is aimed at people who've done no programming whatsoever. I also have a one-day course. I've got to mention the course. I also have a one-day course called Getting Started with the Python Scripting Language, which is also aimed at people who have done no programming whatsoever. Okay, so I've had people who've come on there, not done any programming, and left being able to write Python scripts. I always say I teach you enough to make you dangerous on that course.
So an honest and interesting guidance there, Ed. And I guess on that, the sort of next question about the ArcPy methods that can sometimes take longer than SQL. I guess again, as our probably the person who's used ArcPy the most, is that something that you've got any thoughts on?
Well, this is an interesting question. I've been doing a little bit of research in the while you guys have been presenting, and there are so many things that we could talk about here. It really is like, how long is a piece of string? It's when you're running that SQL, you're running it directly on the database. So you're obviously going to get very fast response times, but 60 plus minutes does sound like a long time. I'm sort of thinking that whether that person has a large number of feature classes within that geodatabase, for example, whether those feature classes are stored in lots and lots of feature data sets, because every time you query that database, those feature data sets have got to be opened, and there's an overhead in doing that. Whereas if you're doing that through an SQL query, because you're working directly on those tables, there is you're getting less and less of an overhead. So those are my sort of immediate thoughts on there. It sounds like there's some bottleneck somewhere, because it shouldn't take 60 plus minutes to evaluate methods like listing all the feature classes in a geodatabase. That does sound abnormally long. So there must be a bottleneck somewhere. So I'm wondering if you can run some sort of a network trace or some sort of database network trace to work out where those bottlenecks might be. That's my
Thanks
sort
for
of
that,
view on
Ed. We're getting towards the end here, so we'll just try and wrap up the kind of last couple. Apologies for not giving an answer on the Power and Automate question. I don't know if either of you know directly. Again, it's not something that I've tried or heard somebody kind of talking about having done. It certainly sounds possible. I don't know if it's something you've ever come across, Will.
Yeah, so I could take this one. So I do often use, say, Azure pipelines to automate and run Python scripts. So as long as you can set up a Python environment that can pull in the Python API libraries or ArcPy, depending on which one you're using, and you can execute that script in that environment, then I feel like there's no reason why not. Like I said, I do it a lot in Azure pipelines. So yeah, I'm not too familiar with Power Automate. I can get back to you on that, but I believe I'll say yes if you can set the environment up.
Cool, thank you, Will. And the next one
Can I
about
do one more?
yeah, I was just going to say the error 99991. That's something that for us as well. It's a little bit frustrating when you come across a generic error that doesn't have information with it. I do know the development teams try and provide more helpful and meaningful errors. If you do spot something and you're able to provide some information about where it's occurring and what was running, and you can raise that with the tech support team, it's something that it can feed back. Or the community site, there's an active community site, and that can be another good way of feeding back to the development team on things like that. I know it is something that they do try and cover the kind of all the different errors in a more meaningful way, but it's not always entirely possible. But I think we'll need to make it the last one, Ed, but go for it.
Yes, just very quickly. Can we debug Python notebooks, finer them block by block? Yes, you can. It's not supported directly in the user interface of your Jupyter notebooks, but you can import a Python package called PDP, and that will allow you to set breakpoints, and then you can move your code through a command line, one line at a time. So yes, you can do it, but you have to do it through code.
Thanks for that, Ed. And I've just noticed, I guess, an aspect of notebook credit costs that I didn't cover. Again, I'd need to double check, but I'm fairly sure that if you run an advanced notebook, which is the one that uses credits per hour, if you're running it as a scheduled task, it will consume credits, and that's to do with the additional resources that are being spun up in the background to run that. It's fantastic that you've so many of you came along to the webinar and you've stayed beyond time to listen to our answers. Apologies if we haven't managed to answer your question, but we do really appreciate the engagement. There's one hiding down the bottom there, which is about Model Builder in ArcGIS Online. Keep an eye out. I know it's something that's been kind of around as an idea. But thank you again for joining us, and we're going to wrap things up there. Look out for that email. It's going to have the recording link and also some follow-up resources for you.